Okay, everybody. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Ethelene. I guess we might as well get started. 7:01, so pretty punctual. Definitely New York time, not, so I'll say not Columbia time. Um, anyway, it's great to see you in commemoration. This event is in commemoration of Women's History Month, and on behalf of the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication and the graduate program in journalism, and in collaboration with a lot of different units on campus, the Hofstra chapter of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, which makes me really happy that it is once again in effect and has official recognition of the university. The Center for Civic Engagement, the Center for Race, Culture, and Social Justice, and the Latin American and Caribbean Studies program at Hofstra LAX. We welcome you to this event, Crossing Borders, Building Bridges, a journalist's heart in Latin America. This is a live, hopefully interactive, engaging conversation with somebody I consider a good friend and somebody who's inspired me for many years, veteran journalist and public radio producer, Maria Martin. She's the founding executive producer of the program Latino USA, which is you may have heard about and you've probably listened to on NPR, but she's done so many other things. And we're going to talk about her work and her book, etc. My name is Mario Murillo. I'm a professor, a longtime professor here at Hofstra University. I'm also the vice dean of the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication. There's so many people to thank, and I probably will forget one or two of them, but I do want to make note of some of the folks who made this happen tonight, and I'm really happy about doing it. It's been a long time since I've been in connection with Maria, so I'm glad that she's finally here at Hofstra. And a lot of people made it happen. So I want to thank all the folks at the Dean's office in the Herbert School, of course, the Dean, Mark Lukashevitz, Associate Dean, Adria Marlowe, Robin Crosby, and Susan Mulligan, and all the folks at the Herbert School. A real special thanks and shout out to the folks at the Hofstra University Cultural Center, in particular, Carol Mallison, and the superstar, I would say, of Hofstra, Ethelene Collins. For those of you who don't know, the Cultural Center puts on unbelievable events, even certainly before COVID and during COVID, during this whole crisis. They've brought some of the greatest minds in the world to speak to the Hofstra community over the years, and they do such a great job with a collaborative spirit and with energy and with enthusiasm. And so I really want to recognize the work that Ethelene, Carol, and the whole team at the Cultural Center does on a regular basis, on a daily basis. To make it happen, we also got, gathered funds from a number of different supporters on campus. I want to thank the executive director of the Center for Civic Engagement, Phil Dalton, and his graduate assistant, Kali Wynn, the Center for Race, Culture, and Social Justice, Jonathan Lightfoot and Veronica Lippincott, and my colleagues and friends, Benita San Pedro and Brenda Elsey, the two co-directors of the Latin American Caribbean Studies program, of which I'm also a faculty member in that program as well. So I want to thank them. A big shout out to my good friend and colleague at the Herbert School, Professor Ivan Cardona, who is the faculty advisor of the Hofstra chapter of the NAHJ, and he also was instrumental in making this happen. And another shout out to Professor Elizabeth Burke, who's invited her entire graduate class in journalism to be a part of this session tonight. So we're kind of interfering in her class, but she was very gracious in recognizing the importance of what Maria has to present tonight. So I thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us, and welcome you and your students to the session tonight. And of course, thank Maria Martin, who's joining us. I would say I'm a bit jealous from Guatemala, warm, comfortable temperatures in Guatemala, and you'll be hearing from her in a moment. She'll be introduced by our two great students from the NAHJ, Damali and Ariel, in just a moment. I just want to go over a couple of quick orders of business before we welcome Ariel and Damali. A few things that we want to touch on today. We could talk about a lot of different things. So I really want to focus on the important role radio plays in the news and information ecosystem as a journalistic, storytelling, communication vehicle. I've been doing radio now for the better part of my adult life. It's hard to believe it's over 35 years doing radio, and I bleed it, and I swim it, and I live it, and I eat it. And I think it's a really important component of and it's growing in a new forms. And I think that's an important thing that we want to talk about today, the role radio plays in our journalism kind of environment. Obviously, we want to hear from Maria in terms of the work that she's done as a pioneer in public radio, opening spaces for so many journalists and producers throughout the country and also in Latin America. So I'm sure she'll inspire many of you, those of you students who are here joining us to do the kind of work that Maria has done for so many years. I've learned a lot from Maria over the years, working directly alongside her for so many years as a correspondent for Latino USA. And I think all of us will tonight. So we want to hear some of her own experiences and perhaps maybe get some reporting and storytelling and editing tips from Maria in terms of how do we do this kind of work? How do we engage audiences with stories that not everybody's telling, that are, for the most part, very often ignored by so many other media? So that's something that I hope we can kind of squeeze out in the 85 minutes or so that we have with Maria tonight. I think also looking at what she's doing now in Guatemala is really important. The work that she's doing with young journalists and radio producers and radio activists in indigenous communities in Guatemala. For me, that's important. I've done a lot of this similar work in Colombia and in other parts of Latin America. And when you're exposed to that kind of experience, you realize the importance and the need of these communicative spaces. And Maria has a great opportunity right now over the last several years, over a decade now, hands-on working closely with some of these communities. And I think we could learn a lot from them. You know, I've said that I've done some of these training workshops in Colombia and Paraguay and Cuba and other places in Ecuador. And I always feel like I learned so much more from the communities that I'm working with than they're learning from me going down there, supposedly the expert and the person who knows what they're supposedly doing. But I think also within all of these issues, I think what comes up, and it should be prevalent in our conversation, is the issues of representation, of diversity, of equity, of resistance, if I can use that term, because obviously a lot of these voices have been ignored, have been marginalized, have been ostracized. And even though there have been many spaces opened in the last 10, 20 years, public radio and other media, and Maria has to be recognized for the work that she's done to be a part of that cracking the door open, there's still a lot of work to do. And the hill is still steep, right? The hill is still steep in which we're walking up. And I hope we can consider those ideas as we move into the conversation tonight for the program. So without further ado, I definitely want Damali and Ariel to introduce Maria, but to start things off, I'm going to share a short video. This little video is a kind of an introduction for us to get to know. Let me see. Continue here. Okay, make sure I'm not going to mess this up. I want to share a little video of Maria, which is sort of her kind of life story. Let me see if I can cue this up. Okay, here it is. Okay, and share the video for. Let me see. Here it is. It's Maria's story. So this is a short video that gives you a sense of. Okay, let me see. Why is that happening? Okay, here it is. There you go. We got the technology. So this is a video that basically introduces us to Maria for tonight's presentation.
Madre, yo soy mexicano, por destino soy americano, yo soy de la raza de oro, yo soy Mexico-americano.
I was about 6 when I heard we were moving north. The children are becoming too Mexican, said my Irish-American father. And so we took the train to Nogales, away from Irapuato, Guanajuato, and Monterrey, Nuevo León, away from the land of mis abuelos, Pedro Garcia and Guadalupe Rios de Garcia. We were going to a place where they only speak English, to the land of my father, Charles McGlynn Martin, who'd come south to study on the GI Bill and to get away from cold Chicago winters. And he found Adela Garcia.
Zacatecas a Minnesota.
I was frightened about the move for me and for my mother. So many small children to take care of. Johnny's just born. Frank is 2. And Maria Cristina, named in Spanish, like me, is not yet 4. Nacho is older. Maybe for him, this move was even harder. I only knew a few words of English. My father reads to me after dinner. In the new school in Nogales, Arizona, they punish you if you speak Spanish. I quickly learned not to do it. I quickly learned to negotiate the many borders I was constantly crossing.
Yo soy chicano, tengo color, puro chicano, hermano con honor. Cuando me dicen que revolución, defiendo a mi raza con mucho valor.
Almost 20 years later, I'm a volunteer at the country's first bilingual public radio station, KBBF in Santa Rosa, California. It's in English and in Spanish. They play reggae and rancheras. Its audience, farm workers and Chicano University students. One night, I was on the air and a woman called, crying. In Spanish, mixed with tears, she told me she'd taken an overdose of pills, but no one at the hospital could understand her. She reached out to the one thing she trusted in this country, her radio station, her lifeline. I think back on that night when I think about what brought me to radio and media. Maybe, like that woman on the phone, I also needed a lifeline, one that brings together my 2 worlds, my 2 Americas, with compassion and understanding.
The tide of the West is rising with people from every tribe, from China to Puerto Rico.
Okay.
We follow.
Okay, so you got that. I'm going to stop the share on that, and I'm going to introduce, it's a great pleasure to introduce, I guess we could say, co-host for tonight's program, 2 great students in our journalism program, both juniors, so I'm really happy because we have another year and a half to work with Ariel and with Damali. Both of them are majors in journalism. Damali is also a double major in political science. Is that correct, Damali? And Ariela, you're a double major somewhere, I would imagine?
Yeah, in Spanish and in journalism.
Okay, beautiful. And they both very active in the recently recognized student chapter of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Damali is the president and Ariel is the vice president. Yeah, Katrina, you're right. We should be applauding the fact that they have official recognition and they're working hard to keep it going and doing a lot of great things. So I'm going to throw it to them. Ariel and Damali, take it over. And of course, if I know I left a lot out. You're doing great work with Long Island Advocate and with other spaces, but it's all yours now, Damali. I'm going to keep my mouth shut for the time being.
All right, hello. My name is Damali. As Marla mentioned, I am the president of NAHJ. And for those of you who don't know, NAHJ is dedicated to the recognition and professional development of our Hispanic journalists in the School of Comm. And Ariel is the vice president, who's my right hand. He's done a lot. But we want to introduce Maria, who we're so excited and honored to meet and talk to today. Maria Martin is an award-winning journalist, and on top of that, she's also in the Hall of Fame of the NAHJ. She is a multimedia journalist and radio producer who is the founding producer of NPR Weekly news magazine Latino USA, and her new memoir, Crossing Borders, Building Bridges, a Journalism's Heart in Latin America. She tells the story of being one of the first Latin news directors at the first bilingual public radio station in the US.
And on top of being an absolute icon already, for the last 10 years, she has been directing the Gracias Vida Center for Media, a nonprofit organization based in Texas and Guatemala. And the center has helped provide resources and support to the rural, provincial, and indigenous journalists in Guatemala, Bolivia, and Nicaragua. Her groundbreaking work has documented the Latinx movement for justice and inclusion in both the United States and Americas as a whole. It is an absolute honor, and thank you so much for being here, Maria.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you, Damali. Thank you, Mario. And thank you to the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication and Hofstra University for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity. I'm so glad that you are here to take a little listen to my story, hear a little bit about my life in journalism, crossing borders and building bridges, and hopefully to have a great conversation about that topic and any others that you may want to touch on. My intention is that after this time together, my story may in some way help or inform you in some way along your journey, journalistic or personal. And again, I want to thank the Vice Dean of the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication, Mario Murillo, for this invitation. A little story about Mario. Long before he was an academic, he was, still is, but a shining light in community radio. And I would run into him at conferences of the National Federation of Community Broadcasters, where I would be impressed by his commitment to doing radio in the public service. And I must say, by his smooth manner at the mic. Some of us are great at live radio. Some of us are not so great at live radio. We're more sort of a kind of produced radio type people. But anyway, I think Hofstra and his students are so happy to have him as, and are so lucky to have him as a teacher. And I am lucky to thank him for this opportunity to share with you about the theme of crossing borders and building bridges, or trying to build bridges anyway, something which, as you can see in the video, I've been doing for most of my life, and that I write about in this book, which is kind of a little slice of a longer memoir that talks at much greater length about my experiences, both good and bad, trying to make public radio really public. And this book speaks more to my experiences in Latin America and how I got to be based full-time in Central America after almost 30 years in public radio at a number of community stations, including the first Latino-owned and operated community radio station in the country, KBBF in Santa Rosa, California, and as an independent producer at National Public Radio in Washington, where I was many things, including the one and only ever Latino affairs editor on the national desk. And then moving to Texas in the early 90s to develop the program Latino USA, where for 12 years I was its executive producer and editor. And then at some point, that all changed, and it all came to an end unexpectedly. And I found myself in Central America, a place that I'd visited as a 20-something year-old mochilera or backpacker right before I began my radio life. But I had returned to Central America as a journalist on a number of occasions to report on the Sandinistas in Nicaragua in the 80s, when that country was involved in a proxy war with the US, to Guatemala to report on the signing of peace accords that finally put an end to 36 years of a bloody, bloody civil war that took thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives, to El Salvador to report on the elections right after their civil war came to an end. Then when, as I said, things changed for me, I found myself after so many years back in Central America, in Guatemala, And I asked myself this question: what the hell am I doing in Central America? It's so far from what had been my home. Well, let me read a little section from the book where I do ask myself that question. When I arrived in Antigua, Guatemala at the end of 2003, it was more like coming home to lick my wounds to get over the scars of what really had felt like battle. I was beaten down and hurting, with no motivation to do the work I had been doing with such diligence and heart since 1975. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll start to work on this next project. No more putting it off. But my heart wasn't in it, even though I'd always been terrifically productive and hardworking, to the point of being a workaholic, my friends would tell me. But somehow my motivation was gone, missing, disappeared. La causa was not there anymore. That burning desire that had driven me for almost 3 decades. But to what? To use the media as a tool for social change? That sounded a little trite, and really, if some of my former national public radio colleagues heard that, actually some at the network already had accused me of, oh my God, advocacy journalism. What was it that an NPR program host had called me during my difficult years there? Ah, yes, the Latino advocate. I'd argued that reporting Latino issues was just as valid as covering a beat like sports or health or science. But they weren't buying that back then. No, not in those days, when it was permissible for big media to totally ignore the growing Latino population. In those days, when the correct terminology about the makeup of the US was white and black or black and white, never mind brown, Asian, or Native American. People of Latin American heritage were almost absent in the media, certainly in public broadcasting. To make them visible, I made efforts to have public radio live up to its name. And I gave it my all. And I did give it my all while trying to do good radio. Basically, I set out to make the medium more diverse and inclusive, and some people didn't like that. I wanted to be a good journalist. I wanted to tell stories that would make people think and listen, and to tell them in the most compelling way that I knew how. I fell in love with this medium of radio, with its use of sound to create magic, to create images without video, to let audiences hear people's voices, often the ones that weren't often heard in the media, to hear their accents and their ways of speaking. I wanted to use sound to transport listeners to different environments and places, using the lovely way that audio has of using rhythms and pacing to pull people into a story. And if I were telling a story with characters who spoke a different language, how could I do that and still touch people's minds and hearts? So let me play you a small segment of a documentary that's 1 in 12 of the series I produced, called Después de las Guerras, Central America After the Wars. This one is called A Tale of One Village.
Today, we're traveling down what appears to be an ordinary dirt road in Guatemala's northern rainforest, headed towards the tiny village of Santa Maria Ceja, just one of hundreds destroyed during the worst years of the bloody Civil War. It records the memories that are often difficult for those in Santa Maria Ceja to remember.
Hay veces que me dificulta un poco, pero hay momentos que sí puedo.
Edwin Canil says it's hard for him to talk about the events of February 1982. The headlines in American newspapers told of other happenings in Central America, in El Salvador, and Nicaragua. But there was little news of what was happening in this part of the region, about how just south of the Mexican border, a column of Guatemalan soldiers marched into the isolated jungle settlement called Santa Maria Ceja. Edwin was just 6 years old then.
Solo recuerdo que me metí entre la vegetación, como te decía, hay plantas que cortan, otras que son espinas, y me metí así. Y no me fui muy lejos.
I only remember running. When I heard the gunshots and screams,
Seguía la
I didn't turn around.
Sí.
There was a fallen tree trunk, and there I hid.
Yo no volteé a ver para atrás.
Then I heard a little girl crying, and it was my little sister. It seemed as if I were watching play.
Seguía la
Then I saw a soldier lift her up and take out his knife, and
Y cuando vi un soldado, agarró, levantó a mi hermanita, sacó su cuchillo.
he took her arm and cut it off
Y la
and threw it
tomó su
away.
brazo y
I did not understand what I was seeing. I did not know what death was. Later, when soldiers left, I went back where the bodies lay in a circle, and I laid down with them, waiting for them to wake up.
yo no
My
entendía.
mother, my grandmother, my cousins and uncles, my little sister.
No lloré.
I began to talk to them. Mother,
Me metí
grandmother.
en medio.
They wouldn't answer. They wouldn't wake up.
Nadie se levanta, nadie. Y vi a mi hermanita. Lo que yo recuerdo, mi hermanita ya no tenía cabeza. Se despedazó todo.
Then I saw my little sister without her head, and my mother with a bullet. I was afraid. I was scared. Then I left.
The body of a young Guatemalan woman, a migrant shot by a...
That always gets me to hear that. And I'm happy to report that Edwin Canil, who was then 6 years old when he experienced this horrible tragedy before his eyes, that today he is a human rights lawyer, and that he has been very instrumental in some of the really important human rights cases here in Guatemala. So this project that I was having such a hard time getting to do or wanting to do, because I was feeling I didn't know what I was doing in Central America. I didn't know where my life was going. I'd been kicked out of public radio, but I finally, just, well, what happened is I read a book by the Zapatista leader, Marcos, El Sup. And then I thought, Maria, it's like, hello, other people have it much harder, right? And I went to Chiapas and I did some reporting there, and then I kind of got my spirit back. And so I was, I a little bit got over this idea of being kicked out of public radio, maybe even being blackballed from it because of my activism. And I did because, as my grandmother used to say, my abuelita Lupe used to say, she'd say, María, no hay un mal que por bien no venga, which is basically every cloud has a silver lining. And so there was, and so there is, And let me show you about that silver lining that came to me, because I found myself in Central America, now producing this project. Okay, let's see if I can make myself a little smaller. There we go.
You're able to share the screen, right, Maria?
Yeah, we're not sharing the screen yet?
No, you can. I think you can. You should be able to.
No, I mean, can you see my screen?
I see your face, but it's up to now no screen.
Okay, okay, then what did I do? Okay. Let me see. Okay, here we are. See my face, where's my face? Okay, coming. Don't you worry. We'll get to this. Okay, drag this, here we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're sharing the screen now. Okay.
Sure. So we still don't see it, Maria.
Let me see.
Uh-oh.
Okay, don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Okay, I'm sharing the screen. And okay, sharing the screen. Here we go. And play from the start.
Now you got it.
Okay, there we go. So this is the silver lining right here. It's actually living in Guatemala, right? And this is a view from the window of where I've lived for since 2003. And I asked myself that question, what am I doing in Guatemala? This is a view from another window this morning, actually, you know, about 5 o'clock, 5:30. And here is the volcano called Fuego, just puffing away. So with this inspiration, the wonderful majesty of nature and the warmth of living in a Latino culture, even though the society has its, certainly there's negative downsides to living here that I report on all the time, right? But here's another take on this volcano. We actually have 3 active volcanoes now out of 36 in this country. So with the energy from Los Volcanes, I set out to do the work. And after all, it's all about the work.
There you go.
So what I did is, as Ariel and Damali said, I started the Gracias Vidas Center for Media, a media production and training center that also has a mission for promoting the practice of independent journalism in the public service and fostering cross-cultural understanding and creating forums for increased North-South and South-North media exchanges, using the communications media to promote a more just and peaceful world, and providing diverse audiences with multiple perspectives on issues affecting Latinos and Latin America. Our first major project, as I said, was this 12-part, actually it was 24-part because it was a bilingual series called Después de las Guerras, Central America After the Wars. What we try to do with this
question, Mariana,
yes.
that's a series, a 24-part series, 12 parts in each language, which
Yes.
Which aired all over. It was distributed and broadcast everywhere, right? That's
well, it was it was actually I had to fight to get it on Latino USA. First of all, I had to fight for many. So for a while, I wasn't even going to receive the funding to do the series, which I had been awarded. Never had a Latino project receive this much money to produce a series, and I couldn't find an outlet for it. So I talk about a little resistance, and I've often faced a lot of resistance, but finally it aired on Latino USA. I also distributed it independently, and actually wanted to get it on, or shorter versions of these long form documentaries to get it on National Public Radio, because, you know, they were wonderfully produced. We had great producers working on this, not just myself. I was the executive producer, but we had great people, Mandalita El Barco, Roxandra Guidi, John Burnett, Frank Contreras, who reports from Mexico. And actually, of the 12 pieces, only 2 versions of the series aired on National Public Radio, and that was one by John Burnett and Mandalita Barco, who were working actually for NPR. But you know, it got done, and we informed about media in Latin America, about the role of women in Latin America, about evolving indigenous identity in Central America. We did a lot of marketing to get to the project done, and this is the little, I love this image, this postcard that was sent to market the series, and it's so, I just think it's an amazing photograph by a photojournalist named Donna De Cesare, who has done a lot of work in Central America and also in Colombia. And she teaches at the University of Texas at Austin. Okay. So the idea for this series was obviously to tell the story of Central America 10 years after kind of the media packed up their bags and left, right? Central America during the 80s was a big story. In the 90s and in the early 2000s, not so much. And people would ask, why are all these Central Americans living here, right? So I wanted to explain the connections between our 2 countries and to do it with a team of journalists. We had for each of the pieces, some radio journalist who had experience covering Central America or Latin America, an early career reporter, and a Central American reporter. I thought that was the most important part because this was about training, about learning, about networking, and hopefully that there would be other opportunities, you know, in the future for these teams to team up again. So we traveled to villages like Santa Maria Ceja, where we interviewed this couple that in their early teens had decided that the only option open to them was to join the guerrillas. And we talked to people like Nobel Peace Prize laureate Rigoberta Menchú. This project was 2 years in the making. And as I said, it won some awards. It did get on you know, a lot of radio stations, but it didn't get the wide audience that I hoped. It didn't bring down the walls in the editors' minds, and it didn't create the appetite for Central American coverage that I hoped it would do. So, and after this project, I still would pitch stories from Central America. You know, this is a really great story, and immigration and corruption and da-da-da. And I would find often deaf ears, right? So, you know, what I had learned to do, my life had taught me that when one door closes, another one opens. And so that's what happened.
Just a quick note, Maria, on that, if you don't mind me just interjecting.
Not at all.
And it's interesting because in the most recent context, let's say the last 10 or 12 years in this country, so much focus has been on Central America from the context of gang violence and and immigration and tying those together. But there's nobody who's really covering the context. Why are those phenomenon happening? And it's directly tied to the stories that you were trying to engage audiences with, but that the editors and the programmers weren't quite interested in. So it's kind of interesting.
Yes, it's kind of interesting and kind of sad and kind of ironic, you know, that it took how many years and the process, right? The deterioration, the destabilization of these societies that caused this mass migration to the States, right? And even then, it wasn't until the children were being, you know, just totally in a godless way, you know, separated from their parents, that finally, I think, Central America became a big story. But because one of the missions of the Gracias Vidas Center was to create a North-South dialogue and improve journalism in Latin America and have better coverage of Central America and the US, which as we just talked about, we tried, and greater understanding of each other's reality, what I started to do was to work with journalists in a much more consistent way, right? So I was spending less time reporting, more time training. So in the last 15 years, I've done dozens, maybe even hundreds of training workshops, usually from 3 days to a week, with mostly on-the-job trained journalists in the provincial areas of Guatemala, as well as in Bolivia and Nicaragua, but mostly Nicaragua. And you can see for many of them, and these are people who work in community stations or commercial radio and television stations and print outlets, getting a diploma is a big deal, right? Because they have no formal training. And one other thing I always notice here is just the dearth of women, right? I'm always trying to get women to come to the workshops, and it's getting a little easier, but still not much, right? But these are two women, two radio producers from the province of Coban, and they work with a women's cooperative that produced Radio del Mercado, where they would hang speakers in the marketplace, right? And play health information to be listened to by the shoppers in the market and el mercado. Right? I've also spent longer times, sometimes doing week-long workshops or several days at community radio stations in Guatemala. This is a cute little marketing for La Voz de Atitlan, and I think we're going to listen to a little something or watch a little something about La Voz de Atitlan.
Yeah, if you could stop the share there, I'll.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, let me see. Guate Community Radio. Let me share this here. Boom. Okay, let's play a short portion of this because we want to get to some questions.
En los estudios de emisora La Voz de Atitlan, que 10 minutos tras las 5.
There was hope in particular for increasing access to media. Since the peace accords were signed, hundreds of tiny community radio stations, some no bigger than a closet or a turntable and a board in someone's backyard, have sprung up in rural Mayan villages across Guatemala. They are joining about a dozen more established community stations like La Voz de Atitlan, established in 1965 to serve the needs of its rural population.
Su salud era peor, era horrible porque mucha enfermedad, la gente, los niños, no tenían ni caites ni zapatos.
Their health was horrible.
No hay una...
The children didn't even wear shoes or sandals.
No hay calle buena.
There was no clean drinking water.
De salud.
No paved streets, no health centers, and no schools for our population.
Nosotros veíamos de que sí había una gran necesidad en nuestro pueblo porque solo había como 8 o 10 maestros en una escuela.
Community stations have made a difference in their communities. Recently, La Voz de Atitlan inaugurated a new bilingual school in Santiago de Atitlan. The classrooms are part of a community center where the station is located. At the ceremony, there was a remembrance of those who have died as a result of their work with the radio station. In the early 80s, the Army tried to shut down Guatemala's community radio stations like La Voz de Atitlan. and those who struggle for a more just society in Guatemala continue to hope and work for more equitable access to information, even in the face of blatant government corruption and, again, a growing number of human rights violations.
Okay, we'll stop it there, right? Okay, let me stop sharing. There you go, Maria. It's all yours again.
So imagine, people died, right, to do radio, right? And people are dying to do radio. I've had 5 of my students. So in 15 years in these workshops, 5 of my students have died, including Angel Gaona of Nicaragua, who died while face streaming a protest in Nicaragua in 2018, right? So this is a photo of one of the last workshops that I did in Huehuetenango. Huehuetenango is one of the most rural and indigenous provinces in Guatemala, and one which sends, if not the number 1 highest number of migrants to the US, probably the second one, right? And so this was, I guess, the beginning of 2018, and I had already made up my mind that I needed to get back to reporting, even though nobody wanted my stories. But that when Mr. Trump got elected, that all hell was going to break loose with the immigration and immigration policy, and that I needed to tell the story. And in any case, I had been funding the workshops, or the workshops had been funded through a number of sources, but my most consistent funder was the State Department, that under the Obama administration and even the Bush administration valued journalism training, but not so much under President Trump. So I started to travel to communities that are so marginalized and forgotten that remittances from migrants are basically their economic base, such as the case of this community, where you see these Mam men from the Mam Maya ethnic group in Todos Santos, Cuchumatan. So I've been reporting from Todos Santos and from this area on migration in general and the connection of Todos Santos with so many communities, including one in Oakland, in the Fruitvale district of Oakland. There's a huge community of people from Todos Santos. And I reported on families affected by Trump's family separation policy, like this family of Nazario, the father, Marcelina, the mom, and the little girl, Filomena. She accompanied her dad up to the border and was separated from them from about May until August, when she was among the first group of children to be returned. And they happened to make the front page of the main newspaper, Prensa Libre, there. There's Nazario and little Filomena and her mom and her grandmother, and everybody had come down from the mountains of Huehuetenango to greet her. I was working as a fixer for a reporter from KQED in San Francisco, Faria, and anyway, I continue to be in touch and to tell their story. There's little Filomena, one day after her return, and I can't even imagine everything that little girl has gone through. And I've also told the story of another family, the older boy here, Franklin. He was taken from his father at the border. And just this really sad story, and not an uncommon story, as many of you know, of people who can't even afford to feed their families and can't find work and have no opportunities. They have nothing. It's not like, oh, I can look for a minimum wage job. No, there are none, right? And so that takes me pretty much to today, right? Where I still try to reflect society to itself, even in the time of pandemic. We do these things, we do them on the phone, still trying to cross borders, build bridges. And as you all know, the need is even greater now. And the need does not end. That's meeting that need was why I started the program Latino USA, to cross these borders so that, the listeners of public radio could become more diverse, right? So that different Latino groups could be introduced to each other's, right? And 25 years, it's still on the air. I often run into young reporters whose first piece was on Latino USA. So I call them my radio babies. That was one lesson from this experience, to trust your instinct, because so many people told me, oh no, don't leave NPR. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to do this program. Latino programs never work. So trust your instincts. And other lessons, just very quickly, is that we are a divided society, and each of us has a role to play, I think, in making a better world where people understand each other. That perhaps, many of you are journalists, right? And although things have changed, there's still change to be made, right? There's still change to be affected. And one of the things that I learned is when you're trying to do that, to not see yourself as a victim, to try to find your place of power when you do this, right? Because otherwise, I have to confess that in my younger days, I often maybe saw myself as a victim, and that would just lead me to be victimized all over again. And I wish I could have done things a little different. As you know, as we're all finding out in this country, in this world, trying to create change is not easy, and it can have a personal cost. What I did to cope is I ate emotionally. That's not good. Some people drink, some people do some other things, but you have to keep your power. And sometimes, as I've told you, the universe shows you a way out. That sometimes a calamity, sometimes what seems like a tragedy, a disaster, a loss of a job, or a change in direction, it might actually turn out to be a good thing. Because remember what my grandmother said, no hay un mal que por bien no venga, right? Every cloud has a silver lining. So creating change and being a good journalist is a long-term process, not an overnight proposition. And so I think one of the things that is helpful, that I hope you will do, is to prepare yourself for the journey. And let me just read to you 2 paragraphs. Sometimes I look back and I ask myself what I might have done differently these last 40 years. I recognize that I may have been thin-skinned and perhaps not as strategic as I could have been. I might say now to my younger self, there's my younger self on the left, Maria, don't take things so personally. Surround yourself with allies, with counselors, and with spiritual support and guidance in order not to lose your power. In my view, these strategies would have allowed me to work longer and smarter in engaging the long process of creating change. Maybe it's just the passage of time that will eventually bring it about. Young Americans today are much more comfortable with diversity than many of those in my generation. There are more Americans of mixed heritage like me. And as I told those who gathered one day in Austin to celebrate my 40 years in radio, when you're caught in the middle, you are not only placed in a situation of occasional discomfort, but out of that condition often come opportunities for understanding, to bring sides closer together, to create a space for compassion and forgiveness and restorative justice. I have great hopes that as the number of these bridge builders increases, they can help to create a better, more tolerant society than that which exists today. And whatever your heritage or age or gender, you could be and are a bridge builder. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. I guess the virtual clap is necessary, but maybe you could stop the screen share right now, and we have about a half hour, so I'm going to, I know Ariel and Damali had set up some questions, and we also didn't want to do chat questions. We really were hoping that you, all of you participating, would have some questions. Because this is a panel on radio, we want to hear your voice. So I guess we'll throw it back to Damali and to Ariel, maybe to kind of get the conversation started. I have about 25 things that I would like to ask, but I'm going to not do that. I'm going to open the space for everybody else. So thank you, Maria. Wonderful.
Okay.
In your early days of NPR News, you were one of the first few Latinx reporters. Can you describe some challenges you faced?
Well, those challenges had to do with the fact that these really smart people who were the editors at NPR were very, very not aware, not connected to, ignorant, whatever, of many realities, the border realities, the realities of the different kinds of Latinos, the reality of Puerto Rico and its complex political and social milieu. So I would say that the reason that I left National Public Radio, this is the story that I tell, is that out of maybe, 5 story ideas that I would put forth, maybe one would be accepted, and maybe and that one might, even because it was not edited by me, it was edited by somebody else, it would give me a really sort of sick feeling to hear it on the air. Now when I hear stuff about Latinos or the Latino vote or whatever on National Public Radio, I mean, at least it's on, right? But I think, oh my God, that was the story we were telling 20 years ago. It doesn't have any nuance, it just hasn't moved forward at all.
You still don't get it. You still don't get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have does somebody else want to go first?
I just want to tell anybody who, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand on the little reaction thing, the little hand thing, and we'll see it come up here. But Ariel, absolutely, go ahead. It's your.
Yeah, no, this is seems like kind of like a little off topic, but a really interesting thing that I heard in the video was you talked about a story of a woman who called about an overdose. So I wanted to know if you could talk about that story and then also talk about like what you got out of that situation.
Mm-hmm. People ask me about that woman. Did I follow up? I tried to follow up, and I couldn't get any information on her the next day. It was, when she called, I think it was almost midnight, right? And I was alone at the station. And what I did is I was able to translate, right? And so hopefully, but I was, I was alone at the station, and I had to run the board, and so by the time that I got back to that, and I pray and know that she made it, and in some way she, I was her angel, she was my angel, because it really did make a mark on how important, this power of the microphone is incredible, right? Because somehow it reached her. And so when she had nothing, she had the radio station. And when I remember being in Bolivia, and there was this one program where people from the community just came to talk on the microphone to tell people who were over the border in Chile as migrant workers that, your mother's sick, come home, right? Or we have a job for you now you can come home. This radio, not only still for, farm working communities that, turn on the radio at 5 a.m., but still in many, many places, rural places in Latin America, despite the fact that there is an internet and there is cable television and all of that, that maybe some of those communities still don't have, but radio speaks to them directly. It speaks to them as a friend, and much more importantly, it speaks to them in their language. In Guatemala, there are 23 different indigenous languages, right? And you never hear Mayan spoken.
It's what Alfonso Gomucio, actually he is.
Yes, of course. Yes, he's my friend.
Yeah,
yes.
He's from Guatemala, but he's spent a lot of time. Oh no, he's Bolivian.
He's Bolivian.
He spent a lot of time in Guatemala, and he made a distinction between information and communication. That very often the commercial radio model is information, but there's really no communication. Whereas when you have this kind of radio, people are communicating, hearing each other, listening to the voices. We have a lot of people to talk, a lot of questions, and I know Ariel and Damali too, but I'm going to see if I remember in order. It was Melissa, Crystal, Katrina, Roxy, and Lucas. So we have 5 questions. Let's try to, maybe we should ask maybe they could all ask the question and then you can hit it, or how would you prefer, Maria?
Let's just do it one-on-one and quickly.
One at a time. Okay, so Melissa, I saw your hand first. Take it away, and don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
So my question's a little different than what you were talking about, but as a woman in radio journalism, do you sometimes feel disrespected in the line of work?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Let me see. Yes, I guess is the short answer. One of the reasons that I left National Public Radio to start up the program that became Latino USA, it was based at the University of Texas. And when I got to, and I thought I'm going to be working with my, with my hermanos, my brother Latinos, and everything's going to be great. And there was really no support for me as a woman. And that was even worse than trying to break through the white media. That was even worse than the barriers that I faced at National Public Radio. So, there's a lot of stuff that we all need to work on. Thank you. Thank you, Melanie.
Melissa, any tips on how to deal with that in the workplace? Because I would almost guarantee that every one of the students that are here are going to face and confront that in one way, shape, or form.
I think just to, I've always tried to be diplomatic, right? I've always tried to reach, to make a stand, but not to kind of wave my flag. But I think what I said before from that reading from the book about having allies, about being a little bit more strategic, about not losing your power, about not feeling, oh my God, I'm hurt. How dare you say that? No, just to stand your ground and state your case. And sometimes then you have to, if that doesn't work, then, work with allies, right? Right.
Yeah, I want to get to some other questions, but it just reminds me because on the one hand, you're fighting for stories about the community, the Latino community, you want to get those stories out. But also there's also the assumption that because your name is Maria Martin or Mario Murillo or Damali Ramirez, you're going to cover Latino stories. I remember one of the first stories I did for Pacifica, I had just gotten back from 6 weeks in Palestine in Israel. And I did like a 4-part, what we would call today podcast, 4-part series on the uprising in 88, 89, the Intifada. And I was pitching it, I was developing it, and I heard people saying, wait, he's Latino. Why is he doing a story about the Palestinians, right? And so it's kind of a counter situation to that. Crystal Bermudez, I saw you had your hand up, and then from Crystal, Katrina. Crystal.
Hello. Hi. Hi,
Hey,
everyone.
Crystal, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I enjoyed your presentation. Which, speaking of your presentation, I wanted to ask because, you know, we've spoken before, and every time I hear you speak, I always just get so emotional because of I can only imagine just the experiences you've gone through and what you've seen and witnessed, and you know, all these people that you come across, and you know, in some way, shape, or form you touch them. And I just wanted to ask you, like, how exactly do you know, even when you're reporting alone, like, how do you, well, one, how do you, you know, you witness so much, how do you still continue to, like, you know, put your foot forward, and like, you know, you watch all these devastating things, and you know, not all of it is all devastating either, but what keeps you motivated to, you know, continue on, and how do you like separate
Because,
how
yeah,
you feel emotionally,
right.
how it touches you emotionally, how do you separate that from the work that you do to just tell this?
Yeah. Well, you take all of that into yourself, at least this is what I do, that I am that bridge. That if it weren't for me, you know, if it weren't for me, oh shoot. So this, I have this doorbell that just does not stop. Hold on.
Okay, again, then we still have about 23 minutes, so we still have a little time.
Okay, so what I do is I realize that I'm the bridge. I'm the means by which these people will get heard, right? So I, in some ways, have to have some boundaries while keeping my heart open, because I'm the journalist, but also, like, say, when I was interviewing that couple and their little boy, Franklin and Gilberto and Zoila, and I could tell that this little boy who had been separated, he just come back, and you could tell, pobrecito, his little, you know, he was hurting. He was hurting. So I have to be, and maybe not all of us will do this, but for me, what works is I'm the journalist, but I'm the healer too. You know, I can hold that little boy and tell him, you know, sometimes, Franklin, things happen for a reason, and we don't know why, but maybe, you know, maybe when you're older, you know, you might be able to understand, and you might be able to help some people. And now you're, you know, sometimes I feel the need to do that. Maybe that's crossing some line, but I feel I need to do that because I have to be, you know, true to my feelings. I also need to get good tape. So you're balancing, I think, all
That's
of
a good
those
point,
things.
Maria. I was just going to say that because you're in order to make the connection with the person that you're interviewing, that you're telling the story, you're trying to convey their story, you have to have a certain level of confidence with that person. If they don't believe in you, if they don't trust you, it's not going to come across. This is what I try to tell my students. So you got, at a certain point, you got to relax and connect with the people. You can't
Exactly.
kind of say, you know, I'm a reporter, I'm going to do this.
Right.
And sometimes when the stories are at that level that you're dealing with, you have no choice but to engage with them as a human, not as a reporter or as an
Oh,
interviewer.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we have a lot of people. Katrina, you're next, and then Roxy, Lucas, and Jair. So hopefully we'll get enough time. We have enough time to hear everybody because I'm enthusiastic to see all these hands up. Katrina, your turn.
Hello. Before I start engaging in my questions, I just want to virtually, you know, thank you for your persistence and especially dedication to really be a change in the world. And, you know, although it may not really be for fame, but for the common good to make a better future for journalists. Pioneers like yourself truly paved the way for the new wave of journalism. And it truly is an honor to speak with you. You know, we both come from mixed heritages. I myself am half Irish, half Ecuadorian. So I really understand when you say the connection to crossing borders, because it really could be a juggle balancing two strong cultures. and, the similarities and the differences that come with it. But again, I really want to thank you for this. The questions that I wanted to ask you is, the history and the birth of the Latino USA is beyond inspirational, and especially those who brought this radio station to life. I found it exceptionally encouraging for women and men to really not be afraid or even hesitant to follow their dreams despite their cultural background. Have you ever considered making a documentary of it?
I've I've been working on my story, and as I said, there's a longer memoir, right? There's a longer memoir that I think is actually a great story, but it's taken me. I haven't been able to find a publisher for that yet, and so last year, because of a number of kind of coincidences, I was able to get this sort of a booklet of the big book published by an academic press in San Antonio. And so, but I'm still hoping to get, that bigger book out, and that for somebody to use that material, because when I look back at my life, I've been to a lot of places, done a lot of things. Yeah,
it was a great. It is a great project. What Latino USA did. I'm happy to say I had a little granito de arena at its outset when it first started as a program that was coming out of the University of Texas with funding from the Ford Foundation, and it was an unbelievable approach that the programmers, yourself, Maria, took in reaching out to all the different community producers and reporters from all over this country, from Miami, from New York, from Chicago, from LA, from all over.
And I wanted it to be from Latin America also.
Yeah, right. So as opposed to doing this top down, this is what we're going to give you, it was really communicating with the public, with the people who are on the ground, and again, it was great to be here in New York, being a part of that project, and really building it from the ground up. And that it's still on the air, it's still producing, it's still creating stuff.
Indeed.
It's a great tribute to your work. Roxy, you're next, I see, and I hope we have time to get everybody, because I see other hands up as well.
Hi, good evening, and thank you again for doing this. I've unfortunately never really heard of you beforehand, but I was reading so much about you earlier today, and it's a very interesting story. And I was actually wondering, given how you've covered so much heavy materials, and you even mentioned before the need to have heart and boundaries, do you find yourself keeping in contact after the story with people?
Sometimes I do, and sometimes that's hard, in many of these places, they see an American, they see a journalist, and they assume that you have a lot of money, right? And so that's kind of this difficult line to walk sometimes. There was a program that aired in September through Reveal. That program, although it was very different, the end result was very different from what I wanted to see in the first place, but I was able to tell the story of this family that was separated at the borders, and it touched some people's minds and hearts, and some people donated money to this family. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I tell you, it has been the most complicated thing to get the money to them, to get them back to the donors, to prove that this guy's, because basically they wanted to pay this guy's debt because he had accrued all this debt to make the trip to the border, and then he comes back, he lost his child, and he lost the money, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's been it's too complicated to go into all of the details right now, but sometimes I do, and sometimes it's like it comes with the territory. If you're going to be a human, there's going to be complications, and so it is.
But that is a great question, right? I mean, sometimes it's funny because I play some of the pieces that I did way back in the mid 90s, late 90s from Latino USA to my class to give them examples of certain approaches. And I'll hear voices, and like there was one piece that I played about Latina women with AIDS and struggling. And there was a woman who was talking about her addiction. And as I listened to it again, most recently in the class, we played it a few weeks ago, I said, I wonder what happened to this woman. I don't know where, what could have happened. That's almost a bit painful to think that we're just kind of taking these snapshots and, down the road. But that's part of the work.
That too.
Yeah. Lucas, you're next. I think you had your hand up, so.
Yeah. Hi, Maria. First of all, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. It was very great what we were going through. I just wanted to know, what is your advice for someone like me who wants to be have a career in radio or television?
Well, I would say just follow your heart. That's what I would say. And don't follow the road only of, the best paying job just follow your heart. If your heart says that's the way to go, then do that. Don't be absolutely, taken down by when a good job doesn't come, or, you're working here and you wonder, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing in Central America? I think if you have ethics, if the decision that you make down the road, that's going to guide you, right? And then get as much experience as you can and talk to as many people as you can and learn as much as you can. And after all, and do all the work that you can, because it is about the work more than anything. I guess that's the beginning. This is a long conversation, but that's the most important thing, Lucas. And the best of luck. And you know what? Whatever happens, it's going to be good. Really.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jair, your turn. I also want to go back to Ariel and Damali, because if you guys have the privilege of moderation. So if you want to jump in with anything that you've heard, I don't want to sidetrack that. We still have about 13 minutes, so I'm going to try to squeeze in as many as possible. Jair, since you had your hand up and you've been patient, go ahead. Where are you?
I'm right here.
Okay, there you are. Excellent. Now I see you.
So Maria, I just wanted to say, nice story. Thank you for talking about your journey. I just wanted to know, do you think that there needs to be more mentors to help the younger generation and guide them in the world of journalism?
Absolutely. I think having a mentor is absolutely key, right? When I got to NPR, there was nobody to tell me, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And, so that's why, many people take longer to just, on the learning curve, right? Everybody else had mentors because, they went to the same school or whatever. I was the vice chair of something called the Affirmative Action Task Force at NPR once upon a time. And we did a big survey of people of color who had worked at NPR, who had left NPR, or who were still at NPR. And that's one of the things that everybody mentioned. And that's one of the things that we wanted to put in place in terms of recommendations. So that's absolutely key. So if you don't find one, look for one, right?
Well, Jair, you're here at Hofstra. There's everybody in all the faculty want to be mentors. You consider them your mentors and in the work that you want to do.
I mean, I could look at Professor Burke as a mentor. I mean, there's people outside of Hofstra that I do consider to be mentors, but I mean, I just think that I know for other people though, they struggle looking for mentors and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make a little shameless plug here because we're doing another event in 2 weeks on the 17th, and this is another radio event, March 17th, Wednesday, and it's actually part of the radio podcast class that I'm teaching. and a number of the students already spoke. We're going to have 3 radio presenters, including Mandalit. Mandalit's going to join us from California. You mentioned Mandalit El Barco. She's the
Yes.
arts and culture and news reporter for NPR in California. But we'll also be joined by Duhalisa Kautau, who's also an NPR host who was a student of mine back in 1993-94 at CUNY. And then the other person who's going to speak with us is the public affairs executive producer of Public Radio in Miami, Chris Remington, who is another student here at Hofstra. He's an alum of Hofstra. And to see those folks doing great work in public radio makes me feel like, again, mi granito de arena, my little grain of sand, has had a little bit of an impact. So I hope, Jayo, you can join us on the 17th for that session as well.
That's on a Wednesday, right?
Yeah, Wednesday evening. So
at what time?
It's the same time, same bad channel. I see Tyler's hand up, so let's go to Tyler. And we have about 10 minutes to go, so this is good.
Hi, I just want to say you are incredible and your story is just as incredible. I'm wondering, I understand you've sacrificed a lot to be in the position that you are now, and a lot of things that you've done have not come easily for you. What would you say you do, and how do you avoid being complacent in your role? And what is your biggest motivation?
My biggest motivation is knowing that my life's purpose, I've been lucky to know that it was very clear to me from early on that it was to, tell stories, to create community, to have these voices heard, right? And to do it, even if I wasn't, making a lot of money doing it, that's what I'm here to do because I'm good at it, right? So.
Good questions. A lot of very
terrific questions. I mean, questions that you could go on and on about.
Damali and Ariel, do you want to add to? I know you had some other thoughts that you wanted to share as well, since we have a few more minutes left.
I do want to ask one more question. It's kind of like advice, but it's no secret that journalism tends to be a white dominant field. And one thing that I struggle with, going out in the field is, balancing the Latinx community, but also wanting, my own field of so I guess I can say is how do you balance serving the Latinx community while also professionally trying to build your career?
Well, I think all of us, maybe struggle with that a little bit. I tell you, I kind of never did because I knew I wanted to tell the Latino story, and I knew that there's other stories there to tell. So if I wanted to do those stories, I would tell those stories, but there was so much within, the Latino community in terms of culture and music and politics and all of that wasn't being explored, that was kind of wide open. But again, just follow your heart and your intuition. There's all kinds of stories to tell, and that being Latinx, Latino, Latina, whatever, should not prevent you from telling them if those stories are calling to you.
Absolutely, and there's so many platforms now. I mean, again, podcast. I refer to it as the golden age, the new golden age of radio, because there's so many places to get it out there, and there's everything from Latinx stories like La Brega, which is a brand new 7-part podcast that Futuro Media and WNYC Studios put out about the Puerto Rican experience. But then there's tons of other really incredible storytelling podcasts that are coming out, and they're heard on the radio. So yeah, it's a matter of finding what you're interested in and covering it. Ariel, did you want to add something in the last 5 minutes or so? And I think I saw Roxy too, but I wanted to get you, Ariel, as well into the.
I mean, I can ask a million questions going forward, but I would actually like to let someone else go if they'd like to, because I know I've already asked a few questions now.
Okay, Roxy, I think I saw your hand up, go up before, and
Yes.
So Roxy, and then I see Crystal as well. One last question, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Go ahead, Roxy.
So you have so many stories to, I assume so many people have approached you in the situations that you're reporting on. And I know that there's a lot of information that comes your way in terms of like people's struggles. And I know when you're reporting on a story, you only have so much time to put the information out there. Can you discuss what your editing process is like for all the vast amount of information that you have?
Well, you know, there are many formats, and my preferred format is to do long form documentaries, but there are actually, you know, limited venues for that, at least I've found. And, you know, as an independent producer, I'm always, you know, kind of hustling for grants and fellowships or whatever, so I'd be able to tell stories in the way that I would like to tell them. But you know, what I've discovered in the last couple of years, where I felt that the most openness at National Public Radio was actually in the newscast unit. You know, 40 and 20-second spots, right, to tell your story. So I've learned to like that format, to kind of see it as a haiku, you know. How much information can I get into this 40-second story? Because, you know, they're much more open to stories from Central America than you know, the foreign desk, etc. So not that the foreign desk is now completely, you know, closed, but it's still hard. And now the stories are the longest story is, you know, maybe, you know, 3.5 minutes. So it's not long form. So then my challenge is, okay, 40, I'll see what I can do in a 40-second spot. Right?
Funny, because that was my first radio gig, was at 1010 Wins. I was the spot reporter doing 30, 40-second news spots during rush hour, you know, prime time, you know, morning drive and afternoon drive. And after a while, I hated it. I said, no, I want to tell the stories. I want to see the people, hear the voices. I don't want to just come out there. But your point is well taken. To do it that way is a skill set that you really have to kind of master.
I mean, I never thought I would like it, but I actually do. And plus, you can finish it up in a much shorter time and have the satisfaction, right, of, you know, researching the story, writing the story, telling the story, and it's out there in a few hours.
Right. I think we have time for one more. Crystal, I saw your hand one more time. So last word, and then we'll kind of wrap up. Crystal?
So I wanted to ask, because just earlier in the presentation, you had mentioned how, specifically in Central America, a lot of like American media, they just upped and left after, you know, the wars had passed and things like that, but no one really went and, you know, pretty much did a follow-up. And then, you know, presently today, as mentioned before, everyone questions, well, why is there so much gang violence specifically from Central Americans when they, you know, mass immigrants come into the U.S., specifically from Central America? What do you think would, you know, now that we mentioned bridges, what would be the bridge that would connect Latin America media to U.S. media, so that when it is being told, it's being told in the correct way when it is being aired or published here in America?
To do that in a real sort of integrated way, I think will take some generations, right? It's going to take people like you, right? And like everybody here, you know, so that you get your feet into, so that there is real change, and people like you and all of the people who are listening to this, and people like me have, you know, are part of the editorial decision making, right? And there's so much that's going on, you know, right now that I'm excited for. There was a young man in that picture from Huehuetenango, the training session, and he started as one of my students, like, you know, almost 20 years ago, and now he puts radio stations online from different communities that then that connects them to transnational communities in Florida, so Guatemalan Mayan communities in Florida or California or Michigan. So those kinds of things, I think, when those people like this young man, William Lopez, or his children, get to be part of the media in the U.S. When all of this alternative things, alternative ways of telling stories happen and flower, and they're already doing it, but there's going to be so much more because this country is changing no matter how much resistance there is to that, and the media will reflect it.
Absolutely. Well, Maria, I have a confession to make. I really took advantage of this event really to recruit as many of the students that participated today, undergraduate, to take my radio feature.
To your radio class, I did.
So I'm hoping that we lock them all in for my class in the fall. But no, Maria, un placer, muchísimas gracias, un abrazote grande. Thank you so much for being with us. And everybody, how about a real live round of applause?
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for being here. And, it's all going to be good. You're going to have great lives. You're going to have great careers, and great will be defined by if you follow your heart.
That's right. That's right. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Carol, Athaline, Robin, all the people who had something to do with tonight's event, Damali and Ariel, of course, NAHJ. Get involved with NAHJ if you're not already involved, and NABJ and all the other groups that are emerging now at the Herbert School. And I think some of us are staying, or at least Maria's going to stay with a couple of the folks from HEAT to do a recording for the Hofstra Today show. So
okay.
I'm
going to take a 5-minute break, and I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.